The Game Boy Advance, a handheld console that aired in 2001, is a product of Nintendo's history that I love with all of my heart. From the notable JRPG titles Pokemon Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green, where you amass a team of up to 6 of your favorite monsters, to Mother 3, an emotional roller coaster of family heartbreaks, the GBA is comparable to a Thanksgiving dinner. Except you're playing all of the appetizers laid out on the table rather than eating it, preferably. It seems that for any genre a player can think of, there is always something substantial on the table for you to sink your teeth into on this purple landscape of happiness. One of them that we're gonna digest today is a title that I'm just finding out about as if it's been buried underneath heaps of treasure, and that game is Wario Land 4. An adventure that features an amazing blend of platforming and puzzle-solving action was sure to blow me away on my initial playthrough, and it did. This was my first ever Wario game, and I'm happy to say that it exceeded my expectations. That's enough exposition though. Let's get into what makes Wario Land 4, something that could be considered top 5 material within the GBA library, so greatly compelling. So basically, Wario was reading a newspaper one day when he finds out about a pyramid within a jungle that was ruled by Princess Shakora until she was cursed by the Golden Diva. Driven by the allure of curiosity and probably limitless amounts of treasure, seeing as this is Wario we're talking about, the man drives to the site of interest, making his presence known to the pyramid. While inside, a black cat lures him into what happens to be a ditch which traps the money-driven fiend within the depths of the tomb. The quest then transforms itself into a journey to escape the pyramid, and in order to do that, Wario must navigate a slew of interconnected passages. All of them transport him to a variety of different biomes and landscapes. Pieces of a jewel are scattered throughout each of the places he travels to, and upon collecting all of them in a given level, the door to the passage's guardian is opened. Wario would then steal their prized possessions after overpowering them until he finally reached Golden Diva. She falls to the funny fat man's might, with her defeat alleviating the curse she placed on Princess Shakora, who happens to be the black cat at the start. Thankful for Wario's help, the woman would leave a kiss on his cheek before finally parting ways. Now then, Wario deemed it time to celebrate, and what better way to do that than burn all of the gathered money on a full-on steak buffet? Wario Land 4 is also packed with a decent amount of movement options that come together to create a responsive, enjoyable experience. You've got an arm slam that grants a means to tackle enemies, the super arm slam which has Wario charging headfirst at crazy speeds, a ground pound that grows in power with the amount of time spent in the air, crawling, sliding down slopes, and throwing objects and enemies across the screen. With so many ways to tackle objects and levels, it's no surprise that Wario Land 4 has gained popularity as a speedrun friendly game. Running through these levels feels snappy, leaving little to no room for complaints about the controls, and generally speaking, it's a whole lot of fun. What complements the player's kit are well-designed areas that'll bring the best out of them both physically and mentally. The goal of each level is to find 4 jewel pieces because, like previously stated, you have to find all of them in a passage to unlock the route to the boss. Most of them are discoverable in plain sight, but a lot of them are hidden in areas that require a fair amount of exploration in order to find. Despite a given passage being divided into 4 levels, each level is fairly large, which isn't a bad thing at all because they all have such a great deal of structural depth. There are multiple sections within each self-contained world to transition to and from, lots of layers of verticality, diverging pathways, pipes leading to treasure-filled puzzle worlds, collectibles scattered in walls, up there, over here, behind this block, there's treasure everywhere. All of these components combine to make for interactive levels brimming with substance at all angles where there is so much land to cover. What makes it all even better is the world design, which fluctuates in ways that ooze inspiration. Although the passages have levels that are visually distinctive from each other, they're all united by an aesthetic design choice that accents a general theme. For example, take a look at the Emerald Passage. It's packed with organic life in the form of grasslands, fields, jungles, or the Topaz Passage, one cluttered with toy blocks, boards, dominoes, or anything else you'd expect a child to interact with in an attempt to entertain themselves. It's always interesting when games do this because it shows that these aren't merely just levels in a game that the player has to overcome in order to complete it, except it technically is, but it stems much deeper than that, you know? These areas are designed with a specific artistic goal in mind that adds to the charm of the game in the sense that there's continuity in the world design as you move from level to level. The Ruby Passage is memorable because each of its stages are related to specific pieces of industrialism. I mean, you've got a factory, pollution, a fridge, and a pinball arena that all are essentially extensions of mankind's effect on Earth, for better or for worse. Consistency in the world design suggests that thought went into how it was crafted, which is an integral part within the medium's ability to immerse the player in the setting. As you go from level to level within a passage, you can expect to explore locations that are understandably intertwined with each other, and that in itself is a level of charm that makes each of the worlds memorable, and more often than not, Wario Land 4 succeeds in this regard. It makes you feel like you're actually progressing through varied yet connected elements of a fully realized world, contrary to something like Mario 3D World, where despite being in a world that's clearly based off the subtlety of the winter aesthetic, I'm playing autumn-themed levels. Minor things like that get a what out of me and take me out of the experience a bit because it takes a stab at that sense of progression I'm supposed to be getting when I'm playing a game. If I'm in a world characterized by glaciers, why am I surrounded by leaves? Did I get warped back to World 1? Fiery Cavern in the Sapphire Passage of Wario Land 4 seems to be one of those levels that seems out of place, but it's not. Every other level in this passage is designed around surveying the internal and external structures of buildings inhabited by enemies, so why is there an underground level? Well, the amount of undead creatures in the Sapphire Passage lead me to believe that the subtle theme of the Sapphire Passage is death, and perhaps the flames of the Fiery Cavern are indicative of hell? I mean, it makes sense when you consider that it freezes over near the end of the stage, because according to something like Dante's Inferno, the deepest depths of hell are actually frozen over. Anyway, from the beautiful sprite work, environmental design, and the sweet soundtrack that ranges from soothing vocal tracks to upbeat music, it's easy for me to get sucked into the atmosphere of Wario Land 4 and forget that I'm playing a video game. I mean, seriously, the level themes here are really good stuff, even if they're simple. That's enough gawking over what can be seen and heard though. I mean, let's get into something that's a bit more palpable, most notably the level mechanics and the gimmicks. If you're a sucker for exploration, then you're gonna love what Wario Land 4 has to offer. Like I said before, these huge levels are jam-packed with lots of treasure, but what makes it all the more interesting is how the game allows you to interact with enemies to move forward. Usually making contact with an enemy in a platformer would result in punishment via losing health or getting a game over or death, you know, stuff like that. In Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, I'm trying my hardest to make sure contact with my enemy involves my sword and their head. However, in this instance, that isn't always the case. In fact, sometimes you want these guys to attack you since it's your only way of completing most of these levels. Wario Land 4 challenges what it means to take damage in a video game, often rewarding you for putting yourself in harm's way, an element of the gameplay that seems to be a breath of fresh air. Got stung by a bee? Now you can float up to heights that were thought to be unreachable. Did a monkey force feed you an apple? Well, tough luck, now you're 200 pounds heavier and should probably burn off those calories by walking to get your body back in shape. Although it isn't all bad because you'll need this status effect to break pieces of terrain you couldn't normally break. Touching fire sets Wario aflame at top speed, allowing him to incinerate these blocks, and well, I mean, you get the idea. There are so many funny transformations that play a part in keeping the level design inspired at all corners. And seeing as how a lot of these status effects can grant you access to shortcuts or treasures, you're only encouraged to play around with them. Between the transformation, movement options, and the worldly depth, it seems like the game is always finding interesting ways to spice up the adventure to the point where it literally never gets boring. Chances are there's a new gimmick or mechanic hidden in a level, or maybe you'll be placed in a situation where you'll really have to think outside the box. The solutions to a lot of the roadblocks are so inventive that it's hard not to break into a smile when you solve a puzzle after a few minutes of running around. Now when you get to the end of a level, you press a switch that both sets off a timer and opens a portal to exit the level. The goal here is to navigate back to the beginning to escape before time runs out, with the atmosphere transitioning from peaceful to critical just like that. Let me say that it's awesome how the levels are well designed both forwards and backwards. More often than not, when you backtrack after pressing the switch, platforms will appear as shortcuts, previously blocked doors will open or close, or even the layout itself doesn't even have backtracking and you'll just keep moving forward. Sometimes there are tricky puzzles you'll have to solve while under the pressure of a timer, with some of the treasure pieces only being available after pressing the switch, which I really liked. One specific example I wanted to point out is of a level I mentioned before, that being Fiery Cavern. The first half of it features dodging an onslaught of rising lava amongst enemies that chuck boulders at you, but after the switch, the cave freezes over and the enemies attack via sneezing. This was so cool how they linked the explorative portion of the cavern to the speedrunning part in ways that made me feel like I was trekking through an entirely new level. And trust me, they get really creative with the ideas they play around with in the passages, like what we see in Pinball Zone or Domino Row. On a side note, Wario Land 4 kinda reminds me of Yoshi's Island in the sense that they're both explorative heavy games that have just enough freedom and movement to speedrun. I get similar vibes from the sprite work, and there are puzzles worked into the level design from time to time. Also, their worlds are initially relaxing when you first enter them, but there's a major trigger that flips the relaxing mood to an urgent one, whether it be losing Baby Mario or pressing the frog switch. I just felt like pointing that out because I love both games, but anyway, let's move on. 3 minigames from a shop can be played using the money you accumulate throughout exploring the levels. Wario's Home Run Derby is a simple swing the bat as soon as the baseball flies towards you. Wario Hop has the Mad Lad himself balancing on a wheel as he hops over obstacles where touching anything results in a game over. The memorization game, Wario's Roulette, will show you an image of a face, tasking you with remembering its look and recreating it. All of these are okay, I guess. I mean, they're not meant to be compelling beyond a service level, but they can be helpful. Rewards earned from these minigames can be applied towards items that do damage to bosses prior to the start of a fight. Seeing as how time constraints and high health bars can end up being a pressing issue on the harder difficulties, I'd advise grinding in the minigame shop a bit just to make your life a little bit easier unless you're a sucker for a brutal challenge. Don't say I didn't warn you though. A time limit accompanies these fights, so you have to act fast because as the clock ticks, treasure in the background will disappear. The amount of chests that you end up with determines whether you'll get a good or a bad ending, so make sure you destroy these bosses in a timely fashion. Although the timer will decrease depending on what difficulty you're on, which leaves less room for error, so be careful. I had a lot of fun taking these guys down with the exception of one, Aerodent, which is a floating teddy bear inhabited by a mouse. You gotta throw these spiked enemies at the bottom end to deflate it, which is simple enough, but right after, you have to tackle one of its feet to flip the bear over to reveal the mouse in its vulnerable state. Now, if you bump anything other than the side that flips the bear or the mouse itself, it elevates the damn thing further up into the air to where you can't reach it. Then it's a rinse and repeat cycle of waiting for it to inflate, followed by it spawning the enemy you need to throw. Is it a poorly designed fight? Probably not. I mean, it just warrants a level of precision that wasn't present in bosses prior, and although I didn't have fun with it, I don't think it's indicative of the developers not thinking straight. Although it is easy to understand why never before seen levels of frustration might surface in someone while playing on super hard, I mean, if a game is recreating how I feel during a chemistry exam, then it's probably stressful. And on the topic of super hard, it's hit or miss for me. Level layout changes like treasure being obscured in different areas or a timer going off at the start are nice alterations, but the fact that you start each level off with one heart combined with over-the-top enemy placement transforms Wario Land 4 from relaxed freedom and platforming to a more passive defensive style that isn't enjoyable for me, given one mistake means restarting the entire stage, losing all of your collectibles. There is way too much pressure in this gameplay shift levied upon me at once to have any semblance of fun. Additionally, the time limit on a lot of these bosses are simply ridiculous. I mean, it's like you need to play them with as much precision as a tool-assisted speedrun bot to win. If you're a fan of brutal challenges, whether fair or unfair, you'll probably enjoy super hard mode even though it just wasn't for me. Although to unlock it, you need to get 10,000 coins on every single level in hard mode. Do what you will with that information. I originally planned to do a roll call of all my gripes with the game, similar to other reviews, but I barely have any issues with Wario Land 4 aside from Super Hard's design and Aerodent. If I were to nitpick some more, I'd say that the only level in the entire game that I disliked was Pinball Zone, most notably because it forces you to interact with the throwing mechanic that can be finicky from time to time. It's annoying how trying to pick up chomp balls can sometimes register as bumping into it. Furthermore, I think that the game could have benefited from having an aiming reticle that shows you where exactly you're throwing to relative to how much you've charged up your object, because getting those chomp balls in the tulip on those moving platforms proved to be a chore. Having to do that around 2 to 4 times per room and then under a time limit only added to my frustration playing Pinball Zone, soon evolving into me disliking it a bit. Aside from those minor complaints, I firmly believe that Wario Land 4 is a top 5 game on the Game Boy Advance, a stacked sandwich of all the essentials you'd want to make up your video game. It has beautiful sprite work and catchy music, responsive controls complemented by a wide array of movement options to literally tackle the multitude of cohesively themed worlds with, fantastic level design of varying layers of depth encouraging exploration as you set off on your quest to amass all the obscure treasures you can lay your hands on, coupled with a dynamic shift to a speedrun to the beginning of a given level that alters itself in fascinating ways. It has transformations that arise as a result of interacting with the bestiary, elevating Wario's to areas previously unreachable, phasing through floorboards, doubling in size, and many more that inject welcome variation into the gameplay. Lastly, generally solid boss design that tests the player's ability to operate under pressure. A few of the issues I had, namely the Aerodent fight, super hard mode's design, and Pinball Zone were slightly annoying, but they paled in comparison to the sheer amount of fun I had with this game. If you're ever looking for a sweet puzzle platformer to dive into, try out Wario Land 4 and see what happens. Although it's beatable in around 7 hours, I still felt that my time with it was impactful enough to warrant a rant about it right here and now. Despite the prospect of a subsequent entry to this series being left in the dark, I do know that Wario landed a formidable title on the GBA, one capable of contesting with the likes of the greatest the handheld has to offer. Thank you for watching and have a good day. See you.